Today, I'd like to start off and ask anybody if you could help me. I have this guy or person or I don't know, doing this all things financial zero on my site. Obviously, I don't know who he is. He's selling crypto. I'm not a fanboy, but anyway, if you can help me, I appreciate it. All right. So I want to talk about the FCA, which is the regulatory person for the UK. They come out and report on their RWAs, risk-weighted assets. And let's discuss starting with HSBC. As you can see here, HSBC's stage 3 loans went up around 13% to $24 billion. And their ECLs, or expected credit losses, are up to or a little bit down to $7.1 billion. And you say, well, what does that mean to me? Prior to the great financial crisis, we did our asset by level 1, level 2, level 3. So think of level 1 as you have 1 million shares of New York Stock Exchange stock to sell. You know, you have good liquidity and you know what the price is. Then you have level 2. Well, it might be harder to do price discovery, as they call it. There's less transparency. And these could be that to go out and price a derivative. You may have an exotic derivative. They're tough to price, but you can get it done. The spreads, that's the bid and the ask, are usually very wide, but you can still get it done. Then there's level 3, which basically says you can't sell them. You can't price them. And so before the great financial crisis, the banks would put everything from 1, 2, or 3, okay? After the great financial crisis, during it, they changed right away to this thing called risk-weighted assets, RWAs. And I can tell you, because I was involved, right after the crisis, we ran around the firm and we got rid of every big RWA we had. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if you own government bonds, the government basically says you only have to own a little bit, okay, of capital behind. And then they ranked every single asset, trade that the banks have, and whatever they decided, like CDOs would have a high RWA, so you had to put a lot of capital against them. The firms got rid of them right away. And the reason being is, as we've stated many, many times before, the banks actually don't have a lot of capital. All right, so let's take a look at HSBC with their $24 billion. Now here's HSBC's chart as of today, but really what we want is that bottom number on the right-hand side, 100 and whatever that is, 57 billion, whatever it is, $150 billion. And of course, they have $24 billion in level 3 loans, which basically are unpriceable, okay? Now, what does this actually mean to us when it's 24 billion? You're like, okay, they got 157 billion, you got 24 billion, everything is, A-okay. But here's the question. That number, the 157 billion, is taking the number of shares times the price, okay? And you come up with the number, 157 billion. That's your, tier 1 common equity, TCE, okay? The only thing that you can write losses off against. So you say, okay, good coverage, 24 billion, 157 billion. But here's the rub. It's a stock price. If and when we will have our next crisis, okay, what sector goes down the biggest almost immediately, given that we're in a highly leveraged financial industry? And it's all the bank stocks. They immediately get crushed. So if something happened in the world and the bank stocks got hit and the price of the stock went down by a third, now it'd be $100 billion. And if it goes down by half, it's $75 billion. But more importantly, the $24 billion is only the level 3. Think about it. They have the level 2 out there also, which are easier to price, but maybe less transparent than level 1. And then, of course, they have all their level 1 asset. So the 24 billion is actually a huge number of HSBC. But the FCA didn't just look at HSBC, they looked at the UK banking system. And the UK banking system now is at an all-time high for their operational risk-weighted assets. So in other words, these are the assets that they have at risk in their bank. And as you can see, why don't we put a number on it? Let's say it's around $330 billion, okay? 330 billion that they have in risk-weighted assets. But when you go and look and see what their common equity tier 1 is for the UK banking sector, it's $461 billion, which in our money is, maybe around 550, okay? Here's the point on this. Think about this. They have about $330 billion in risk-weighted assets. That's not all the other stuff. That's not counting the credit cards, the mortgages, the car loan, personal loans. Corporate loans, right? So in other words, the banking system has around 330 billion of risk-weighted assets on top of 461 billion of TCE. When we look at the banks, we're in a fractional banking system. This fractional banking system is leveraged to the hilt across the world. This is the FCA's report. I don't believe that the report out of the Fed for U.S. banks would be much different, to be honest with you, or frankly, any country in the world. So as you look and we see what we're doing, I would say that the market goes up because the Fed's still throwing incredible amounts of money in there. You can look at our ATI video on that. So what do we do with the banks? How do we make them hold more capital without bringing down the world's economy? What do you think? Like and follow, and certainly tell me what you think in the comments.